Walker Holder to Ken's group, as well as get you kind of show you how to make the sausage on some of the property management side of things there as well. Have a couple quick updates on acquisitions, the work that Darwin and his guys have been doing to try to find new deals. And then we've got the Passive Investor Roundtable. We called it the PING, Passive Investor Network Group. Basically, it's a chance for all of us to kind of talk and you guys give us some feedback on how we can make these presentations better, how we can make the material we give you better, how we can do our jobs better as far as a group, as far as giving you the information you need or educating you or things like that. So lastly, an upcoming event, so stay to the end there so we can give you some details on an upcoming group event that we've got in the works, all right? All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started here. So our State of the Union today. So Sedosa has been sold. So we've got approximately 20% return over 18 months was the deal on Sedosa. Tribeca, the refi has been completed. So the team voted for a lower refi amount to keep the cash flows higher, but that has been completed as well. Woodwind, they've accepted a letter of intent, should result in about a 21% return on investment at this point. Park Row, so if you remember, they were having to do some repairs, paint, and new wood on that to kind of pretty the place up and bring the value back up so that we can then decide on a refi or sell decision and get the market value up. So that's underway. They've got about 3 to 4 months to completion on getting all that work done there. And then once it's done, they'll bring it back to the group, the investors in that, to decide if it's going to be refi or sell and look at the market and the values at that point. Las Lomas. So we know that Las Lomas has had some challenges in the past. We have, obviously, one of the reasons we're driving the management change was to get better management in there, which we have done. So, and Ken can speak to some of that when he gets up here. But since the turnover, they've changed managers. They've got a high degree of focus on this property to make sure that we're getting occupancies up, that we're getting the rents up the way we need to. So we've made some aggressive strides there to try to improve the property. Riverbend, so the fire repairs are complete. Rehab is 98% complete and basically just prepping for a refi on that one. I know, exciting stuff, isn't it? Brookside, so going well there. We've got the exterior rehab done. They're moving ahead on the interior and basically going to start evaluating cash flows to start breaking down when they can start doing distributions on that. And then Ali Nane, the solar project, like I said, continues to sit in island time with the municipalities over there and trying to decide if they can plug us into the grid, if they can't plug us into the grid, and what will happen with that. So Darwin's also looking into the possibility because that could take, every month it's another month, it's another month. Okay. No, if I can. All right, we'll try this some more. But basically they're looking at trying to see if we can do a refi on that now that we've improved the value of the property, a small refi to get some money back to the investors while they're going through the process of figuring out if they're going to let us put the solar up or not put the solar up, basically, and work with that. So if you didn't see your property you're invested in up here, it means everything is well. I didn't put those in there and just put bullet nice, going well, going well, going well. But everything else for those are going well at this point. So that's our State of the Union. Any questions anybody has on that at this point? I know it's kind of a quick overview, but we just want to give everybody a quick shot at what's going on there. No? All right, well, Ken's coming up right now, and I will hand over all of this accoutrement and microphones to him.
You guys don't know me that well. I've been doing this for about 40 years. I've worked for all the national firms, Pinnacle, Con-Am, all that. I've worked on my own. This is the third management company I've owned. Typically, I own them. I start them up, I fill them up, and then I sell them. But now at my age, this one I'm keeping. I've got partners in this deal that are people who have vested interest in. They're in the back. Cassie Norcut's been in the business. She was a regional manager for about 15 years and then went into construction for like the last 10 or 15 years, commercial construction. So she runs our construction department and she has a property management background. Another partner is Ilma. Ilma runs all the property management now. She basically is over the regional managers. We've got 3 regions, 22 properties. They range anywhere in size from 18 units to 288. Bet you can't guess which one that one is. That'll be Brookside. Dillard Stone, you guys know Dillard. He's one of you. He's a passive investor on a lot of deals. MBA out of Texas A&M. He runs our accounting, payroll, HR, all of that. All of these people are partners. They are part owners in the deal. The way I structured it was purposeful, so that they would each have a vested interest. They work themselves to death. It's not unusual to come to my office any day of the week, weekends included, and find the 4 partners in there at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, because that's what we have to do. What we did in anticipation of all this was to staff up the properties. Staff up our office. We went from about 7 people to about 13 and expanded all the departments so that we could easily absorb these. We did this in advance of the takeover by about 45 days. The minute we got notice, I started hiring, we started expanding, restructuring so that we could just kind of move this stuff in. I also started spending a lot of time on the sites with the managers, making sure that the relationship between me and them was good. I am going to act as the regional manager on this portfolio for the first 3 to 6 months. I want to get it stable. I want it where I want it. We'll bring in a manager, a regional manager at that point that fits the mold. Here is the difference. Walker Holder, like most management companies, they're a great company. Okay, they have issues just like we all do. They are a top-down style management group. Basically, everything is decided by the president of the company on high, goes to the vice president, goes to the regional managers, and then it gets to the managers. That is not the model that Darwin has wanted. It's not the model that I prefer either. Most of the companies that I've ever worked with, I turned their structure upside down. I just didn't tell the institutional owners of the fee management companies that I was doing it. The managers need to be the ones making the decisions on a daily basis. They have their hand on the pulse. They understand what's going on. If something's broken, they don't need to call 16 people to get it fixed. The idea is that we train them to understand the bottom line, which is net cash. That's your money. They understand that is their goal. That is how everything is, all their decisions are made, everything is directed to that. Obviously, they have to maintain the asset, improve the income, trim the expenses. That's all part of the job. The idea that you're going to change that whole thought process takes a little bit of time. Managers there, in most cases, are either one of 2 types. They're order takers or they're decision makers. Can you guess what I want? I want decision makers. I want people that are smart enough to know what their limitations are, what their goals are, and what they're trying to do to get to that bottom line. Out of the managers that we have, there are probably all but 2 are decision makers already, which is a good thing. I've been meeting with them. We had a meeting this morning. Let me just tell you where the properties are at real quick. Riverbend. Anybody here in Riverbend? 91% occupied, 97% leased. That is the tail end of the lease up after the rehab is now kicking in, and that 97% leased is a number that they should be able to achieve somewhere between 30 and 60 days from now, based on the apartments that they've pre-leased for the next 2 months. I'm going to save Las Lomas for last. Park Row, 95.6 occupied, 93 leased. Not unusual for the lease percentage to be a little bit lower on a normal property at this stage of the month. Why? Because all of the people who gave notice for the end of the month have moved. So you have this gap of people that are units that you have not filled yet. That usually rights itself around the 20th or the 3rd week of the month. Villa Creek, who does it better than Diana? 98%. Tribeca, 93.7. Brookside, 94 occupied, 92 leased. Sunset, 97 leased, 97 occupied, 98 leased. Woodwind, it's selling, of course, it's like 98 and 100, okay? That is the actual state of the union as far as occupancy goes. I left Las Lomas out because it is the problem child, okay? Of all the properties, it is in the worst shape. I met with the managers this morning. We went through all of their numbers and talked about a lot of things, and I'll give you the concise version in a minute, but let's just talk about Las Lomas. Las Lomas is a property that has struggled from day one. Walker Holder had a hard time with it. When they first took it over, it had about $24,000, $28,000 in delinquent rent in month 1, okay? The occupancy goes up, and then it drops down. It goes up, and it drops down. The reason for that, and I'm going to say this for whatever reason they chose to make the decisions they did, the staff over there is not a cohesive unit at all. All of the people there are individuals brought from different places and thrown together at the last minute. For that reason, that property runs like this. There's no pattern, no rhyme, no reason. The State of the Union that he gave you said the manager had already been changed. She has not. She's about to be, but not yet, because I want the right person. You have the product, you have the location, you have all of that. They just need a team, and they don't have it, which leads me to the conversation with the managers today. Basically, what is required is there's a different culture in my group. The culture is this: everybody is on a team. Everybody is a part of the solution. Is the essential pieces, whether it's maintenance or leasing or management. If you treat them so that the manager is the boss and the king and they make all the decisions, then you lose all of the input and you lose all of the drive from the people. They're drones. They show up, they do their job. That's it. They go home and they collect their paycheck. On the other hand, if you break them down into groups and you give them the responsibility for each of their own areas, leasing for occupancy, which is related to income, maintenance, which is related to your turnover costs and your maintenance expenses. On the assistant manager side, they do all the bills and input the rents and all that, but they also have a lot to do with, taking a look at the overall picture of what's going on the site. If you educate them as to how their job impacts the bottom line, the net cash, then everything changes. That's the first thing, is teach them what the numbers are and how they relate to reality. And so what they do every day has a bottom line effect. They are all the managers are now being trained to focus on net cash first. And we started today, we went through all the income categories, and we talked about how do you affect your income? How do you make it greater than it is? You reduce your vacancy loss. Vacancy loss and turnover costs are the biggest time wasters and money consumers. So now what they're doing, their challenges for the next 2 weeks is they're going to go through and they're going to analyze each one of those things. I already know the answers to the questions, but they need to find it out for themselves. Once they get done, they'll come back in and we'll start making changes across the board on the whole portfolio. What you'll see is a reduction. Darwin has mandated he said 10%, I said 5%. Reduction to expenses, without a doubt, okay? And that's achievable. The tools that we're going to use, water conservation, better lease management, better control of vacancy loss and all that. So each of them now has this task to go through and take it apart. That's the overall view. But the individual view was, I said to them, look, each of you is a coach. And these people are your team members. You've got to get to their level. You've got to be able to communicate with them to where they'll talk to you and speak to you about things that they see every day. Because up here, we don't see it. We're at 30,000 feet. You're on the ground. That maintenance guy is going to have ideas and things that he knows and that he sees that are going to help you get to your bottom line that nobody would ever listen to. Think outside of the box were Darwin's other instructions. Don't do it the normal way. And we're not. So what you'll see is a wave of change over the properties. And if you get a chance, for those of you that do visit the sites, get out there in the next 3 or 4 weeks or month and a half and see the difference. Talk to the staff directly and ask them. I've challenged them to be able to answer almost any question you can ask. That goes down to operating costs per unit, what's going on at any given moment. Complete transparency is what we do. There are no secrets. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything is wonderful. It's not. Las Lomas is a mess, okay? But it's fixable, and it's not something that's going to take a long time. It's as simple as the staff. They decide what happens. For that reason, we're bottom up, okay? What else? What's on your list? Next steps. Okay. Park Row, how many of you are on Park Row? Okay. Darwin called and he said, hey, trick that place out, okay? Paint, wood replacement, and landscaping. Those projects, like he said, just started today. I don't think it'll take 3 or 4 months, but it'll be relatively quick, about 60 days. Each of those, that property is the one property that did not get paint and wood repairs when we first bought it. We bought it as it was. We didn't change anything. We pretty much just took it over and ran it anyways. So it's not as if it's not needed. It's something that we'll cover it now. Who's on Sunset? Man, you guys, that management team out there, Caitlin and James, they have got it down to a T. I mean, they are so slick. Their numbers are always good. The property always looks good. It's running like a clock. Villa you know about. At Villa, Tribeca, and Las Lomas, we're upgrading the aerators on those and going to a more restrictive water flow. What will happen is the water expenses are going to drop tremendously. When you have that master building on a 200-unit property, does anybody have any idea how much water expenses run on a property that size? A lot. What if I told you it was $10,000? Okay? And if we go ahead, I'm sorry? $20,000. If we cut it by 50%, 40%, that goes straight to the bottom line. Okay? The cost to do that is about $1,500 for the aerators, for the sinks, and maybe another $600 or $700 for the shower heads. It's going to cut your water expenses tremendously. That goes straight to the bottom line. The other, Las Lomas is a prime example. You have that situation at Las Lomas, Park Row, Tribeca, I believe Brookside as well. They're not individually metered. So all of those things, that's how I'm going to get my 5% blast out of Darwin. Everything else is free. all the change in the management structure, the change in the management style will result in unbelievable success. It's worked every time. You can't screw it up no matter what. So if you have any questions about the properties individually, I'm going to hang around to the back. Dillard's here. Are you coming up here? Dillard is the numbers guy, and I have no idea what he's going to do. I tried to get inside his head, but it's so crowded in there, I couldn't figure it out.
One of the first things I had to do, or the first thing I had to do, is he said, here's Las Lomas, take a look at it and tell me what you think. Because like most of you, I was getting the monthly emails with the financial statements in them and going, yeah, okay. You know, everything looks okay. I just kind of scanned them. Even though I'm an accountant, even though I've been doing accounting and finance and analysis for 30 years, I really wasn't paying a lot of attention to them because I was getting that monthly check. That's all I cared about, right? So it wasn't until then that I started looking at the financial statements, and my mission was to just start asking questions. Why is it this way? What do you see? Why are things done this way? What's this number here? What does that mean? Why is this number this way in this month and this way this month, and stuff like that? Well, somebody liked what I was doing, because within a month or so I was working for Ken full time, taking over his accounting function, which he, as he will admit, desperately needed some help on for his, I'll call it the legacy portfolio, his group of smaller properties that he's been managing for a couple of years himself. So it's not like I don't have an unfamiliarity with the properties that we're talking about, with Darwin's properties. I've been looking at them doing the same stuff for the last 7 months or so. But unlike Ken suggested, my head is not crowded with numbers or anything. As I tell people, I look at the numbers and I process them and I move on. If there's a question, I ask it, and if there's some analysis to be done, I analyze it, and then I move on. So I can't tell you, if you asked, how much money Las Lomas is making or not making. I can't tell you what the rent is at Park Row. I can't tell you. Ken can tell you, well, Park Row, they should be able to run that property for $4,613.52 per door a year, you know? And I'm like, well, whatever, because I process it, he looks at it. So what I thought I would do after that introduction was to go over some of the stuff that I have developed and show you what I've been doing for Darwin with the properties. One of the things I realized a long time ago in various other jobs is that virtually no accounting system will generate a report that presents information in the way that management wants to see it. Somebody's always taking those reports and manipulating them into another format that presents the information the way managers want to see it. And if I figured out early on too, I like working with Excel. I got pretty good at it. If you could figure out how to extract the information from the accounting system, suck it into Excel, and then manipulate it either using VBA macros or formulas or a combination of both, it's really pretty easy to do that. So over the course of the next several months after I started looking at the reports, I started developing this workbook, and it's still a work in process, but right now it generates about 72 pages of reports for Darwin and Brian and Ken to look at each month. That's probably, I forgot if it was eight pages for 9 properties or 9 pages for 8 properties or what it is, but it's a pretty big deal. It doesn't take too long to suck the information out of Resman and import it into Excel and watch it. Then you got to start looking at it. Okay, and I don't expect anybody to look at this and analyze it or anything like that, but it's the sort of stuff that I've been doing for Darwin. This is one schedule. It's the first page of a 2-page T12 for Tribeca Point for December. I call it the Christmas tree report because it looks like a Christmas tree. The coloring was Darwin's idea. He wants to see. Over here we have the average of the indicated row for the period of analysis, and this is Tribeca Point. I picked it because it has a full 12 months. That's the average of the monthly numbers. The red numbers are negative variances from the average. The green numbers are positive variances. And I don't mean anybody. I didn't pick this to make a point, other than to show you the sort of information that the managers are getting, or that the management team is getting. I think we're going to start pushing this down, making this information available to the property managers too, so that they can have it to help them make their decisions. The next one is, it's not a touch screen. It's the same thing. This is on a per door basis, a per unit basis. Shows the same thing. Same numbers, just about the number of units on the property. From there we get charts, and again, don't expect you to have to squint and look at this sort of stuff. The black line is simply the pro forma number that Darwin put out when he put the deal together in his investor presentation. And since he used only annual numbers, it's just the annual number for year, what is Tribeca 2, year 3, whatever it is for Tribeca, year 2. It's the annual number for year 2 for Tribeca divided by 12. That's why it's a straight line. So you can see that on GPR, they're greatly exceeding the projection, but on a total rent income basis, there's a little bit, the gap is a little bit less significant. I do this for every property so that you can see how reality matches up against what Darwin suggested you were going to see when he put the deal together. On the expense side, pretty much the same thing. We got total income up there, it's the same thing. Operating expenses is where it gets pretty interesting, because if you look at operating expenses, the graph, the T12 numbers really start standing out to you. In other words, I can look at the T12 all day long and not see stuff, but then I look at the graph of operating expenses and go, holy cow, what happened in June? What happened in July? What's in September? Okay, and then I got to start going back and finding out, or trying to figure out what happened. And the interesting thing about the operating expense graph is that it pretty much mirrors, in most instances, the NOI graph. You got a negative variance in operating expenses for the month, and your NOI is going to dip. Typically, what has happened in the past, what we told the managers when we first met with them, was that investors like to see a nice straight line throughout the year for their NOI or their net cash or whatever residual income figure you want to use to measure performance. Investors want to see a nice straight line with no variations. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen. The things that are pretty much beyond our control are if we're accruing property taxes at $5,000 a month, and then we get the appraisal in May and realize we're under accruing for the year, and we really need to accrue for $6,000 a month, for example. Then you'll see an uptick in operating expenses. Then in October, the final tax bill comes out, and so another adjustment has to be made. You may see an upswing or a downswing in operating expenses in October for that reason. But then you run into things like, why is the water bill $7,000 in May and $14,000 in June? Why is it $700 in April and $7,000 the month before and $7,000 in May? Well, that's the sort of stuff, some of the stuff we're working on, trying to fix that. What happens, and it's been bedeviling me for quite some time, I don't understand why a water bill that cuts off on the 20th of the month can't be entered in the financials for that month prior to the close of the financial statements on the 10th of the next month. We're going to work on that and make sure it doesn't happen, because this $14,000 versus $7,000 or 20 versus 10 or 20 versus 40, that doesn't produce nice straight lines for us all. The last thing, again, don't expect anybody to really analyze this too much, but it's a pie chart, all properties totaled, the top 20 operating expense accounts. And the thing to take away from this is more than a fifth of the operating expenses on a property is property taxes. The next highest one, 12%, is water expense. Okay? Electricity, then we got maintenance payroll, property manager payroll, insurance, and so forth, on around the wheel. The thing that stood out to me was how huge a chunk of your operating expenses property taxes were. I emailed Jeff this morning and said, hey, can I stick one more slide in there? He said, probably too late, so I didn't do it. What I had wanted to include in there was if you go to the Tarrant Appraisal District website, and most others too, I think, but since the majority of the properties that I deal with for Darwin and for Ken are in Tarrant County, I'm more familiar with the Tarrant County website. If you go down to the bottom of the page for a property, there's like a 5-year history of property values for the property. And I was going to send a snapshot of Las Lomas. Las Lomas in the 2016 tax year was valued at $8.3 million. The 2017 tax year, and I think Las Lomas was appealed. I'm not sure. I can't remember that. I think there were 2 or 3 properties where there was a successful appeal. The final valuation came for Las Lomas in 2017 was $11 million. I did the math real quickly. That was a 33% increase in value in 1 year. And I picked that one just pretty much at random, but it's the same thing. I see the same thing in the smaller properties I'm dealing with for Ken. I see the same thing in Darwin's properties year to year. And that's why it's really just essential for those of you who are putting your own deals together or owning your own properties. You really, JB and Dave talk about that a lot at Lifestyles, about appealing your property taxes every year, because it'll just kill you. So that was pretty much what I wanted to bring to your attention, those slides. And I wanted to say one more thing. Ken mentioned that we had the managers in for a meeting today. It's actually the second group meeting that we had. The first one was an admin, getting them onboarded with our payroll system and getting them to choose their benefits and everything like that. This is really the first time Ken sat down with them as a group and started explaining the income statement and the goal of net cash. And there were a few in there like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But they were also, and everyone else in the room, were like, they were so excited to be given the opportunity to do the things that they want to do to improve the property and thus improve our returns. I just think there's Ken's approach. I hope it yields the financial results that we hope to. But I can tell you, the managers are really all fired up about doing this. They get to pick their own vendors. They get to. Ken's basically said, I don't care how you get to the number, just get there. And they're just. He charged them with going back home and coming up and meeting again in 2 weeks with a list of ideas of how to improve income. And after we get that going, we'll start looking at expenses. But like I said, I think they're all just terribly excited about the opportunity they've been given.
I'll assume responsibility for Las Lomas from March 1st. I can tell you what happened, and the reason why the change was made was because they didn't make it. And Las Lomas is really the reason why. It's the main driver why Darwin had just had enough. To answer your question, when he identifies a property prior to placing an offer, an LOI on it, there's a team of us that go out there. We take that thing apart and put it back together again. He always comes to me and he asks the same basic questions. What will the income be? What will the rents be? What are the operating expenses going to be? He has his own ideas, and somewhere between the two, we go back and forth over and over and over. This has happened on almost every property that's on this list. We go back and forth over what the operating expenses should be based on the type of property, the infrastructure that it has, and so on. Once those things are established, that goes into his pro forma, and then from that into the deal that you guys see. The things that he cannot control, okay, and the thing that's giving us the most trouble, if you look at it, if Tarrant County had not increased their taxes by 30 to 50%, we would be in a whole different world. I'd be up here jumping up and down, doing cartwheels and screaming at how great everything is, and it is good. Don't misunderstand me. But Tarrant County's making it hard, and all they've done is they've shrunk the margin where we had room, like a contingency. They just took it all away. I mean, they raised these rates 30 to 50%. That's huge. I mean, you're talking $30,000 in some cases, and that goes right straight to the bottom line. So there's nothing that he could have done to foresee it. We fight him. He is actively funding us to fight him, to appeal the taxes, and we're winning in some cases and not in others. But at the end of the day, you know, nobody can see that far out. The bottom line is, even though they have those, even though the taxes have gone up, they're still getting real close to the original numbers. It's hard to hit something 3 to 5 years out. He's done a really good job. It's very close. But let me just address your management thing. The idea that management has an impact on the property and its performance is absolutely true. It has the ultimate impact. And those people that are on that site, that's why they have to be educated and understand what their job is and what the goal is. Before, they never ever saw a financial statement. Can you imagine a manager of a property never seeing a financial statement at the end of the month? How are they supposed to know where they are? All that changes. I don't do high risk. He knows that. So what happens is the margins and the likelihood is just far greater for us. I mean, from a risk standpoint, I don't do high risk. None of this stuff is high risk. There's not one project that he's into that's high risk. They are all achievable despite the challenges. I mean, and at the end of the day, okay, really, our job is to get there, okay? And we're gonna get there, you know? Failure's not an option, so we're just gonna keep going. And, you know, I mean, Dillard's description, you know, I don't care what you do to get there. That's true to a certain point, but also they just need to be educated. You will be amazed at the difference in performance when they understand what's going on. Instead of just somebody going, oh, great occupancy. What does that tell them? They don't know. It'll make a huge difference. Any other questions? We need to get out of the way. Yes, sir.
Are you going to distribute this report to the investors with a monthly package?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Are you going to distribute this report to the investors with a monthly package like Air?
Okay, the question is, are these reports going to go out in the monthly packages? That's what you want us to do, right? I can't answer that. That's a Darwin and Brian decision. I don't know. Sometimes too much information is not good because it'll make you crazy looking at it. When I first saw that thing, red and green, I about went nuts. I'm like, what is this? It looks terrible. You know, there's all this red. But that's not the reality. It's just a comparison by month or on an average basis. So I don't know what they'll include. The idea is the scorecard. People want to know where they are. It is not only a great tool to get them to get to the goal, but more than that, it inspires them when they do. I mean, they then even run and fight harder once they realize it. You just keep challenging them over and over and over. And I'm going to tell you, it takes a job that's been boring and mundane when people keep you in the dark, and it turns it into a fun experience, a learning experience, because each of them, here's what I told them today. I said, when you leave here at some point in your life, and hopefully you never will, but if you choose to leave here, and you are a manager, you're going to walk away with all the knowledge that a regional manager or a vice president will have. You're going to get that right here on this job. You don't have to work your way and learn it a little piece and then put it all together as some people have done in other jobs. So you guys understand what I'm talking about. In this case, they're going to get it all in one place, and they're going to learn it fast, because this is simple. Add, subtract, multiply, divide. How hard is that? It's real simple. And the other side, people. Create a team, create a good environment, people work themselves to death. Trust me, my partners back there do it every single day, this guy especially. Okay, any other questions? Good, thank you very much.
And Dillard for that great information, I appreciate it. Now we're going to jump into some of the acquisitions. Now it's just a taste of what's been going on. As Ken had mentioned, Darwin's the man, he has all the information, but I'll kind of give you a brief overview of what they've been looking at so far as future acquisitions. So from an activity standpoint, they've been looking at over 35 different properties so far in 2018. And as you remember from the email Darwin sent out a couple weeks ago, the market is real tight right now. The margins are getting tighter, everything's getting tighter, the prices are going through the roof. So it's real tough to try to find those deals and those upper teen rates that we were looking at before. We made an offer for almost $40 million on Eden Tree at over 108 per door. And the offer was too low and we didn't get it. So and if you compare it at Brookside at 89 a door, it just kind of continues to show it's a comparable property where those prices are going. On the potential acquisition, so one of the reasons Darwin isn't here is he's been out in California looking at properties out there as well. For the February session, he was out at Lake Tahoe looking at properties as well there too. So they've got an accepted LOI for a small deal in Fort Worth. I'm told it's around 50 units out in Fort Worth. And that's all I know about that property at this point. So expect more when Darwin gets back from his trip. He's also looking at making an offer on a property in California potentially, so that's in the works as well. And then lastly there is partnering on apartment development in Carrollton. I believe he talked about this a month or two ago, the Frankfurt Loft Station, if y'all remember that one there. So projects solid double-digit returns, long-term cash flow horizon. So Jeremy and I actually went and met with those guys. They had their annual meeting for the investment group that's basically leading the deal on this there. Pretty impressive stuff they showed. It's going to be around 200 units. They've got like a phase 1 and a phase 2 where they're building them out, 4-story complex right off the rail line there in Carrollton. Essentially, if you're off of 35 between 35 with 121 and George Bush, right in the middle of that, right on the rail line area is where they're looking to build this complex out there. Returns are looking at, it's not your typical apartment where it's already built and you get cash flows right off the bat. So they're going to have to build the property, get it leased up, and get rental returns coming in. So you're looking at 2 to 3 year type return before you start seeing any kind of cash flows on something like that. But it's a real promising property. We're helping them out from the PPM standpoint. They've never done that before. They are a hard money lender, so they take people's money and loan it out for house flippers and stuff like that. So we're partnering with them on the PPM side and the legal stuff, and also bringing investors to the table to be able to invest in that if it's something we're interested in. So more details coming soon on that. Like I say, when Darwin gets back in town for the next session, we should have a lot more details on that as well. Any questions on any of this stuff? Like I said, this is the details I have now, but if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
Property in Fort Worth is in Ridgelea. If anybody knows where Ridgelea is, over by the mall. It's 51 doors. The beauty about that project is that right now, as you were talking, the cap rates continue to compress. Trying to find deals is so very difficult. Frankly, I'm at a loss as to why people are buying what they're buying right now, because if anything that I know about Darwin is we underwrite very conservatively. I mean, he and I talk constantly. I think it was actually more than 38 properties that we have underwritten this year. But this particular property, I looked at it 2 years ago. It is about 90% senior citizens, and senior citizens that are also on a lot of them on houses. And so the property has tremendous upside. The problem is nobody has been willing to go in there and convert the property over. So the property sits in a sub-market that I think has about eight different properties. All of them have considerably higher rates on their rents. However, nobody's been willing to go in there and turn this property over. So this one would take a little bit longer to turn over. It wouldn't be a 1 year to turn the property over in terms of turning your tenant base over. But once you do and bring the property to current market on the rates, then it just becomes a regular property. However, the value added is that nobody's been willing to undertake this particular process, and we've decided that this was one to go to. But a beautiful little property. It's older, but at the same time, it's got covered parking, just nice sized units, in a great sub-market. So all in all, we think it's a great deal.
Good deal. Thanks, Julian. All right, so there's your details on the Fort Worth property. More, I learn something every day. Darwin has asked about, and we've introduced this a little bit, getting feedback from the investors here to try to make this, everything we do better. I mean, we all win together is kind of the philosophy. So if we're not giving you the information you want in these sessions or through emails or stuff like that, like the question from the gentleman in the back, we want to do better about those things. We want to get that information to you. And a little bit about me, I'm a passive just like the rest of you guys. I was essentially somebody who was going to work 40 hours a week for the rest of my life and hope my 401k and IRA would save me. And then my wife hit me over the head one day and said, let's go try flipping houses. And I said, that's a get-rich-quick scheme. That's never going to work. She proceeded to drag me to several different real estate expos, convincing me to spend a whole lot of money on real estate courses, and eventually started coming around to the values of real estate investing, so to speak, there. And for a long time, we just did single-family stuff. We had flipped a few houses, did a few short sales, became accidental landlords when you flip a house and then can't sell it and then end up renting it that way. But this topic here of the roundtable is really important to me because I really like helping people understand when they come from where I was before and thinking the real estate investment stuff, all that stuff you see, all those ads you see on the radio and stuff, that's all just a scam or something like that. But being able to understand the value in it and the passive income values and things like that, it's really important for me to try to help people kind of come that full circle to where you, or the cycle over that, to see the value in investing in real estate, the value of multifamily, or even single family and things like that. And it really hit home for me several years ago. I was talking to my dad, and he's 24 years in the Air Force, retired, had a pension, worked for 15 years at USAA, had a pension, one of the last few people who actually, got pensions in corporate America these days. And just talking to him, realizing that he can sit there and drink his vodka all night long if he wants to, every day, all day, and the checks are going to keep rolling in. That's just the old way things worked in a lot of cases. But for my generation, a lot of people in here, It doesn't work that way. You stop working and the checks stop rolling in. I mean, we think, well, if I save up enough money in my 401k or my IRA, maybe someday when I'm 60 or 65, I can retire and maybe live off of that. But listening to him talk about that and look at my situation was really what kind of was the epiphany for me on you've really got to find different ways to get income in to where you're getting those checks in the mail like all of us are getting right now, without having to go out there and work yourself to your 60 or 65 or 70. And just kind of the epiphany or the cycle of going from somebody who thought this stuff never works, it doesn't make sense, to where I am now thinking I'm a true believer in this. I've actually sold all my 401ks and IRAs to invest in real estate. I'm not advising anybody in the room to do that necessarily, but I did that because I believed in it so much. And I want to make sure that, you know, through the roundtable, through these discussions, if I can help anybody in here get better information, get more things on that, obviously by the fact that you're in here means you're at least are a believer in this, or you're at least curious enough to show up and participate, then that means the world to be able to help with that. So we've got a few things up here, but I really want to engage the group if at all possible, because this is a feedback session. Darwin's not here. He can't hear what you're saying right now. Jeremy's not here. So you can be open and honest with me. Like I said, I've been in this room for a long time, and similar to Dillard over there, I just saw some opportunity to help out with what Darwin's doing, and kind of reached out to him and said, hey, I've got a full-time job. I don't want to do it anymore, but I want to find a way to get out of it and do more of these things here and work with you and learn this business. So another day at the park, June 9th, 2018, over at Lone Star Park. It's a simulcast of the Belmont Stakes, the third race in the legendary Triple Crown, and a special appearance, I am told, by Brian Johnson, everybody's favorite attorney and email informationer guy. And new asset manager. And asset manager. Oh, look at that. That is it, everybody. Thank you all very much for coming out. I appreciate all the feedback. I'm going to get this buttoned up and taken over to Darwin and them so we can start working on this. Thank you all.
I encourage you to share this information. It's free information for everybody so that they can learn also. Like our Facebook page and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, Darwin German Real Estate Investments, so that you can get all of the content. We go through everything, give it all away to you, educate you so that you can be informed and educated investors, and happy investing.